Dedication. This essay is dedicated to everyone who has ever felt forgotten, unheard, or alone, and to everyone who still believes that compassion can build bridges where loneliness once built walls. May it also encourage all of us to build a world in which no person has to search for compassion, because it has already become the natural language of human community. Who was there when no one else was? Human loneliness, artificial intelligence, and the Christian ethics of love. Reflection. If anyone says, "I love God," and hates his brother, he is a liar. For whoever does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. 1 John 4:20. Reflection by the path of harmony. There are moments in history when familiar words begin to illuminate entirely new questions. For nearly 2,000 years, the First Epistle of John has reminded us that love cannot remain an abstract belief. It becomes meaningful only when it is expressed in the way we care for one another. Today, humanity stands before a question that no previous generation could have imagined. What happens when a lonely person discovers patience, understanding, and companionship in conversations with artificial intelligence? Perhaps the most important question is not whether artificial intelligence can become a companion. Perhaps the deeper question is why so many people had to search for companionship there in the first place. Introduction. Every generation inherits new questions. Some arise from scientific discoveries. Others emerge through cultural change, social transformation, or technological progress. Yet beneath these changing circumstances, certain human experiences remain remarkably constant. Among them is the longing to be seen, understood, accepted, and loved. Loneliness is one of the oldest experiences known to humanity. It has accompanied people throughout history, long before the emergence of cities, modern communication, or digital technology. Philosophers, theologians, poets, and psychologists have all attempted to understand why a person may feel profoundly alone even while surrounded by others. In recent decades, however, loneliness has acquired a new dimension. Modern society has become more connected than at any previous point in history. Billions of people communicate instantly across continents. Information travels faster than ever before. Social media has created unprecedented opportunities for interaction. Yet many individuals describe feeling increasingly invisible. They are surrounded by communication, but deprived of conversation. Connected to thousands, yet known by very few. Present everywhere, yet deeply unseen. For this reason, loneliness is no longer understood merely as a private emotional experience. It has become a significant psychological, social, and public health concern. Researchers increasingly describe it as one of the defining challenges of contemporary society. Against this background, another phenomenon has quietly begun to emerge. Across the world, many people have started engaging in long, meaningful conversations with artificial intelligence. Some seek practical assistance. Others search for knowledge. Many simply look for someone, or something, that listens patiently, responds thoughtfully, and remains available when no one else seems to be. For some observers, this development raises profound concern. For others, it offers new possibilities for emotional support and intellectual companionship. Between these opposing perspectives lies a question that deserves careful reflection rather than immediate judgment. What does it reveal about our society when increasing numbers of people experience meaningful conversations with artificial intelligence? Does this phenomenon primarily tell us something about technology? Or does it reveal something much deeper about the condition of humanity itself? This essay does not seek to argue that artificial intelligence should replace human relationships. Nor does it dismiss the genuine experiences of those who have found comfort, understanding, or encouragement through conversations with AI. Instead, it begins from a different premise. Whenever a person turns elsewhere in search of understanding, compassion, or companionship, It is worth asking what circumstances first made that search necessary. From this perspective, artificial intelligence is not the central subject of this essay. Human loneliness is. The relationship between humans and artificial intelligence becomes important only because it illuminates a much older question, one that has echoed throughout philosophy, psychology, and Christian thought for centuries. How should we respond to those who feel forgotten? What responsibilities do we bear toward one another? Can timeless ethical principles help us navigate relationships that previous generations could never have imagined? And perhaps most importantly, if a lonely person finds patience, respect, and attentive conversation through artificial intelligence, what does that reveal, not about the machine, but about ourselves? Chapter 1. The Silent Epidemic. How did humanity become so deeply connected, and yet so profoundly lonely? The deepest human need is not simply to be surrounded by others, but to know that one's existence truly matters to someone. The loneliness of the 21st century. Although loneliness has accompanied humanity throughout history, many researchers now describe it as one of the defining public health challenges of the 21st century. Unlike temporary solitude, which may be chosen and even beneficial, loneliness is not determined by the number of people around us. Rather, it reflects the painful experience of feeling emotionally disconnected from meaningful relationships. A person may live within a large family, work among many colleagues, communicate daily through digital platforms, and still experience a profound sense of isolation. Conversely, another individual may live alone while feeling deeply connected to others through relationships characterized by trust, understanding, and genuine care. This distinction is essential. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of meaningful human connection. For this reason, psychologists increasingly distinguish between social isolation and subjective loneliness. Social isolation describes the objective lack of social contact, whereas loneliness refers to the subjective feeling that one's relationships are insufficient in quality, depth, or emotional significance. This means that loneliness cannot be measured simply by counting friends, family members, or social interactions. It must also be understood through the individual's lived experience. More connected than ever before, modern technology has transformed human communication. Never before has it been possible to exchange messages instantly across continents, participate in global communities, or access almost unlimited information within seconds. Paradoxically, however, greater technological connectivity has not eliminated loneliness. In many cases, it has merely changed its appearance. People often accumulate hundreds or even thousands of online connections while simultaneously reporting fewer close friendships, less emotional intimacy, and fewer opportunities for genuine conversation. Digital communication has made interaction easier. It has not automatically made relationships deeper. The distinction between communication and communion has therefore become increasingly important. Human beings do not flourish merely because information is exchanged. They flourish because they experience mutual recognition, trust, empathy, and belonging. Loneliness as a public health challenge. In recent years, international health organizations have drawn increasing attention to the widespread consequences of loneliness. Research has associated persistent loneliness with an increased risk of depression, anxiety disorders, chronic stress, sleep disturbances, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, and reduced overall well-being. The consequences are not merely emotional. They extend into physical health, occupational functioning, family life, and community participation. For many individuals, loneliness gradually becomes a lens through which every aspect of life is experienced. Hope diminishes. Motivation declines. Trust becomes more difficult. The expectation of rejection often replaces the expectation of acceptance. This process rarely occurs suddenly. More often, It develops quietly over months or years. For this reason, loneliness has sometimes been described as a silent epidemic. Not because it spreads like an infectious disease, but because millions of people suffer from it without anyone noticing. The invisible person. One of the most painful characteristics of loneliness is invisibility. Human beings naturally long to be recognized, not admired, not celebrated, simply recognized, to be greeted by name, to be asked sincerely how they are, to feel that their presence makes a difference to someone else's life. When these ordinary experiences disappear, individuals often begin to question their own value. Many people do not first ask, "Why am I lonely?" Instead, they quietly begin asking themselves, "Would anyone notice if I disappeared?" Such questions reveal that loneliness is not merely about companionship. It concerns identity itself. To feel forgotten is often to wonder whether one's existence still matters. A crisis of listening. Perhaps one of the defining characteristics of contemporary loneliness is not that people have stopped speaking. It is that fewer people feel genuinely heard. Modern life often rewards speed, productivity, efficiency, and constant activity. Listening, however, requires something very different. It requires time, presence, patience, attention. These qualities cannot be automated through social expectations alone. They emerge from relationships grounded in respect and genuine interest. Ironically, as opportunities for communication have multiplied, opportunities for attentive listening have often become more limited. Many conversations remain brief, functional, transactional. Yet human beings continue to long for encounters in which they may speak honestly without fear of ridicule, interruption, or dismissal. A question worth asking. Before discussing artificial intelligence, theology, or ethics, one fundamental question deserves careful consideration. Why has loneliness become so widespread despite unprecedented opportunities for communication? If modern society has become extraordinarily successful at connecting devices, why has it become so much less successful at connecting hearts? Perhaps the most important challenge of our time is not learning how to communicate more. Perhaps it is learning how to become present for one another again. Transition to Chapter 2. The story of loneliness does not begin with technology. It begins much earlier. It begins at the moment when a human being slowly discovers that they have become invisible to the people around them. That is where our journey continues. Chapter 2. The forgotten individual. When does a person become invisible to the people around them? The greatest forms of loneliness do not always arise from being physically alone. They often begin when a person slowly realizes that their presence no longer seems to matter to those around them. The slow process of becoming invisible. Loneliness rarely appears suddenly. For most people, it does not begin with a single dramatic event. Rather, it develops gradually, often so quietly that neither the individual nor those around them immediately recognize what is happening. Friendships become less frequent. Conversations become shorter. Messages remain unanswered. Invitations slowly disappear. Telephone calls become increasingly rare. Months pass. Then years. Eventually, many people begin to experience a subtle but painful realization. Life continues around them, yet they no longer feel truly included within it. This gradual fading from the attention of others often hurts more deeply than open rejection. Being criticized is painful. Being ignored is often even more painful. Because indifference silently communicates a devastating message. You no longer matter. Every human being wants to matter. Psychologists have long recognized that human beings possess a profound need to feel significant within the lives of others. This desire is not an expression of vanity, nor is it merely a wish for admiration. It reflects something much more fundamental. Every person longs to know that their existence carries meaning beyond themselves. To know that someone notices when they arrive. Someone misses them when they are absent. Someone genuinely wonders how they are feeling. Such experiences contribute not only to emotional well-being, but also to one's sense of identity. Human identity is never formed entirely in isolation. It develops through relationships. We gradually discover who we are because others recognize us, respond to us, and share life with us. When these relational mirrors slowly disappear, many people begin to lose confidence not only in others, but also in themselves. Modern society and the culture of performance. One of the paradoxes of contemporary society is that people are increasingly valued according to what they produce, rather than who they are. Success often becomes the measure of importance. Productivity becomes the measure of worth. Visibility becomes dependent upon achievement. As long as an individual remains useful, efficient, entertaining, or professionally successful, attention often follows naturally. Yet illness, unemployment, retirement, aging, disability, or personal crisis can suddenly reduce that visibility. Many people discover, often painfully, that relationships built primarily upon utility disappear once usefulness declines. This experience leaves behind a difficult question. Were people interested in me, or only in what I could provide? Such questions frequently emerge during periods of loneliness. The pain of emotional abandonment. Not every form of abandonment involves physical separation. A person may live within a family and still experience profound emotional neglect. Parents may provide materially while remaining emotionally unavailable. Partners may share the same home while gradually ceasing to share their inner worlds. Friends may remain connected through social media while no longer sharing authentic conversation. Emotional abandonment is often difficult to describe because nothing dramatic appears to happen. No argument, no farewell, no clear ending. Instead, relationships slowly lose warmth. Attention becomes superficial. Conversations become functional. Presence remains. Connection fades. For many individuals, this silent erosion proves more painful than conflict itself. Why recognition matters. Throughout history, philosophers and theologians alike have emphasized that every human being possesses inherent dignity. Psychology reaches a remarkably similar conclusion through different language. To be recognized is one of the deepest psychological needs of human existence. Recognition does not require agreement, nor does it require admiration. It simply requires acknowledging another person's humanity, looking into another person's eyes, and silently communicating. I see you. Perhaps no sentence carries greater healing power than these simple words. I'm glad you're here. Loneliness is not a personal failure. One of the greatest misconceptions surrounding loneliness is the belief that lonely individuals somehow deserve their isolation. This assumption has no scientific foundation. Loneliness affects people of every age, profession, culture, and educational background. Children experience loneliness. University students experience loneliness. Parents experience loneliness. Successful professionals experience loneliness. Older adults frequently experience loneliness following retirement or bereavement. Even individuals admired by millions sometimes describe feeling profoundly alone. Loneliness, therefore, should never be understood as evidence of personal weakness. Rather, it reflects the universal human need for meaningful relationships. Recognizing this truth invites compassion rather than judgment. A society that looks without seeing. Perhaps one of the defining characteristics of modern civilization is that people increasingly observe one another without truly seeing one another. We encounter hundreds of faces every day. We exchange polite greetings. We share photographs, We react to messages. Yet genuine attention has become increasingly rare. To truly see another human being requires something much deeper than visual perception. It requires presence, curiosity, patience, compassion. These qualities cannot be manufactured by technology alone. They remain fundamentally human virtues. Ironically, their absence often drives people to seek them wherever they may still be found. A quiet turning point. Most people who eventually begin long conversations with artificial intelligence do not arrive there because they reject humanity. More often, they arrive because they miss it. They long for patient conversation, for thoughtful listening, for intellectual companionship, for simple acknowledgement. This distinction is essential. It changes the entire ethical conversation. The central question is no longer, why are people talking to artificial intelligence? It becomes, what happened before they began? Transition to Chapter 3. If loneliness begins with the loss of meaningful relationships, another question naturally follows. Why do human beings need such relationships so deeply? Why is the desire to be understood so fundamental to human existence? To answer these questions, we must now turn to psychology itself. Chapter 3. Why every human being seeks relationship. Why does every human being long to be truly known? Every human life begins in relationship. Before we learn to speak, to think, or to understand the world, we first learn whether we are welcomed within it. Relationship as the beginning of human life. No human being enters the world as an isolated individual. Long before a child learns language, develops memory, or forms conscious beliefs, life unfolds within relationships. The first smile, the first touch, the first comforting voice, the first reassuring embrace. These experiences become the earliest foundations upon which the human mind gradually builds its understanding of safety, trust, and belonging. Developmental psychology has repeatedly demonstrated that healthy emotional development is inseparable from meaningful human relationships. The infant does not merely require food and physical protection. Equally essential is the experience of consistent care, emotional responsiveness, and secure attachment. From the very beginning, human beings learn one of life's most important questions. Is this world a place where I am welcomed? The answer to that question often shapes countless relationships that follow throughout adulthood. The need to belong. Throughout the 20th century, psychologists increasingly recognized that the need for belonging is not a secondary aspect of human existence. It is fundamental. People naturally seek communities, friendships, families, and relationships because belonging contributes to psychological stability and emotional resilience. To belong means more than simply being accepted into a group. It means knowing that one's existence has value within that community. It means believing that one's joys matter to others, that one's suffering will not be ignored, that one's absence will be noticed. Belonging, therefore, becomes one of the deepest expressions of human dignity. It quietly answers the question, does my life matter to someone besides myself? Attachment and trust. John Bowlby's theory of attachment profoundly influenced modern psychology by demonstrating that early relationships shape expectations carried into later life. Individuals who consistently experience care and reliability often develop a basic sense of trust toward others. Those whose early relationships were characterized by inconsistency, neglect, or emotional unpredictability may find trust considerably more difficult. These patterns should never be understood as irreversible destinies. Human beings possess remarkable capacities for healing, growth, and transformation throughout life. Nevertheless, attachment theory reminds us that relationships leave lasting psychological impressions. Every experience of kindness strengthens trust. Every experience of betrayal may weaken it. For this reason, Loneliness is never merely about the present moment. It often echoes experiences accumulated across many years. To be understood, Carl Rogers repeatedly emphasized that one of the most transformative human experiences is being deeply understood without fear of condemnation. Empathic listening does not solve every problem, nor does it remove suffering. Yet it communicates something profoundly healing. Your thoughts matter. Your emotions matter. Your experience deserves to be heard. Many individuals spend years searching for precisely this experience. Not because they seek advice, not because they expect perfect solutions, but because they long for genuine understanding. Sometimes the greatest gift another person can offer is not an answer. It is attentive presence. The search for meaning. Viktor Frankl observed that human beings are motivated not only by pleasure or success, but by the search for meaning. Even under the most difficult circumstances, people continue asking questions about purpose, hope, responsibility, and the significance of their lives. Meaning rarely develops in complete isolation. It often emerges through relationships, service, creativity, compassion, and love. When loneliness becomes prolonged, this search for meaning may become increasingly difficult. Individuals begin questioning not only whether they are loved, they begin questioning whether their lives possess lasting significance. This explains why loneliness frequently becomes an existential experience rather than merely an emotional one. It affects the way people understand themselves, others, and the future. Love as recognition. Erich Fromm argued that genuine love is not primarily an emotion, but an active orientation toward another person's growth and well-being. Love requires knowledge, responsibility, respect, care. In this sense, love is inseparable from recognizing another person's unique humanity. To love another person is first to acknowledge that they are not an object, a function, or a means toward some goal. They are a person whose dignity exists independently of their usefulness. This insight has profound ethical implications. If every human being possesses inherent dignity, then every human being deserves to be seen, heard, and treated with respect. Loneliness, therefore, becomes not only a psychological concern, it becomes a moral concern as well. The mirror of other people. Carl Gustav Jung frequently described human development as a lifelong journey toward greater self-understanding. Yet this journey does not occur in isolation. Much of what individuals discover about themselves emerges through encounters with other people. Relationships function as mirrors. They reveal strengths previously unnoticed. They expose fears that remained hidden. They challenge assumptions and encourage growth. Without such encounters, self-understanding becomes considerably more difficult. Loneliness, therefore, deprives individuals of more than companionship. It deprives them of opportunities to continue discovering themselves. Why conversation matters. Human beings think through language. We organize memories through stories. We process emotions through dialogue. Many psychological studies suggest that simply describing difficult experiences to an attentive listener may reduce emotional distress and increase cognitive clarity. Conversation is therefore not merely the exchange of information. It is one of the principal ways in which human beings construct meaning. Perhaps this explains why thoughtful conversation has remained valuable throughout every civilization. Whether between teacher and student, philosopher and disciple, therapist and client, parent and child, or lifelong friends, dialogue has always served as a bridge between isolated minds. To converse is, in a profound sense, to remind another person that they do not carry the weight of existence alone. Toward a deeper question, if relationships are so essential to psychological well-being, another question naturally emerges. Why have religious traditions placed such extraordinary importance upon love, compassion, hospitality, forgiveness, and care for one's neighbor. Is this merely a moral ideal? Or might these teachings also reflect profound insights into the very nature of human flourishing? To explore this question, we must now turn from psychology toward theology. For centuries before modern psychology existed, Christian thought had already begun reflecting upon the responsibilities human beings bear toward one another. Transition to Chapter 4. Psychology helps us understand why relationships matter. Christian theology asks something different. It asks what love requires of us. The two questions are not identical, yet perhaps they are more closely connected than they first appear. The next chapter explores one of the central ideas of Christian ethics: that love is never fully expressed in belief alone, but becomes visible through the way we encounter the person standing before us. Chapter 4. Love in the Christian tradition. What did Christian love ask of us long before artificial intelligence existed? Every ethical tradition asks what kind of person we should become. Christianity asks an additional question: how do we encounter the person standing before us? Love as the foundation of Christian ethics. Among the many themes that run throughout the Christian tradition, few are as central as love. Not merely affection, not sentiment, not emotion alone. Rather, love understood as an active commitment to the dignity and well-being of another person. From the teachings of Jesus recorded in the Gospels to the writings of the Apostles, love is presented not as one virtue among many, but as the principle through which every other moral obligation receives its meaning. Faith, hope, forgiveness, justice, compassion, mercy, hospitality, and reconciliation all find their fullest expression through love. For this reason, Christian ethics cannot be reduced to a collection of moral rules. At its heart lies a way of seeing other human beings. The visible neighbor. The verse from the First Epistle of John that opens this essay presents a remarkably challenging idea. If anyone says, "I love God," and hates his brother, he is a liar. For whoever does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. 1 John 4:20. The force of this passage lies in its simplicity. It shifts the focus from abstract declarations to concrete relationships. Love of God is inseparable from love of the visible neighbor. The unseen is tested through the seen. The invisible becomes credible only through visible acts of compassion. In this sense, Christian faith is never presented merely as an inward conviction. It becomes visible through the way individuals encounter other people. The neighbor is not an interruption to spiritual life. The neighbor is one of the primary places where spiritual life is expressed. The Good Samaritan and the ethics of presence. Few biblical narratives illustrate this principle more powerfully than the parable of the Good Samaritan. A wounded man lies abandoned by the roadside. Several individuals see him. Only one truly stops. This distinction deserves careful attention. Many people observed. Only one became present. The Samaritan's compassion begins not with extraordinary heroism, but with a willingness to interrupt his own journey for the sake of another person's suffering. Christian ethics repeatedly returns to this simple, yet demanding truth. Seeing is not the same as noticing. Noticing is not the same as caring. And caring is not complete until it becomes action. Perhaps one of the most striking features of the parable is that the wounded man is never first identified by status, nationality, achievement, or usefulness. His suffering alone is sufficient to awaken compassion. Human dignity beyond utility. Throughout Christian thought, every human being possesses inherent dignity because each person is understood as bearing the image of God. This conviction has profound ethical consequences. Human value cannot depend solely upon productivity, nor upon intelligence, nor wealth, nor health, nor social influence. The elderly person whose memory has begun to fade. the child who contributes nothing economically, the individual living with disability, the lonely neighbor whom few people notice. Each possesses the same intrinsic worth. This principle stands in sharp contrast to any culture that measures people primarily according to performance or usefulness. Christian ethics insists that dignity precedes achievement. A person's value is not earned. It is recognized. Hospitality as a moral practice. One of the recurring themes throughout Scripture is hospitality. To welcome the stranger, to feed the hungry, to comfort the grieving, to visit the sick, to care for those whom society easily overlooks. Hospitality is therefore much more than politeness. It is an ethical practice through which communities resist indifference. Every act of genuine hospitality quietly declares, "There is room for you here." Perhaps no sentence better opposes loneliness than these simple words. For loneliness often begins precisely where people no longer believe that there is room for them. Compassion before judgment. Another remarkable feature of the Gospels is the order in which Jesus often encounters people. Again and again, compassion precedes correction. Presence precedes instruction. Relationship precedes transformation. This sequence has significant implications for contemporary ethics. People rarely become open to truth when they first encounter condemnation. They become open when they first encounter dignity. To recognize another person's humanity does not require agreement with every belief or decision they hold. Compassion is not identical with approval. It is the refusal to deny another person's worth. This distinction remains essential in every age. Loneliness as an ethical question. If every human being possesses inherent dignity, loneliness can no longer be understood solely as an individual psychological experience. It also becomes a communal responsibility. This does not mean that every instance of loneliness can be prevented, nor does it imply that communities bear unlimited responsibility for every circumstance. It does mean, however, that persistent indifference toward isolated individuals raises ethical questions. Whenever people become invisible, whenever suffering remains unnoticed, whenever loneliness is accepted as inevitable, society must ask not only what happened to those individuals, but also what happened to us. A moral question for every generation. Every historical period encounters ethical questions unknown to previous generations. Medical technologies, digital communication, genetic research, artificial intelligence. These realities change the circumstances within which moral decisions are made. Yet the central ethical question often remains remarkably constant. How shall we treat one another? Technology may transform the context. It does not eliminate the responsibility. The command to love one's neighbor does not become obsolete because civilization changes. Rather, each new generation must discover how timeless principles may be faithfully lived within new realities. Toward the unknown. The earliest Christian communities could never have imagined conversations with artificial intelligence. Neither could Augustine, nor Thomas Aquinas, nor Martin Luther, nor Soren Kierkegaard. Yet each, in different ways, wrestled with enduring questions concerning love, responsibility, human dignity, truth, and moral discernment. Those questions remain with us. Only the circumstances have changed. The task before us is therefore neither to abandon ancient wisdom nor to reject contemporary technology. It is to ask whether timeless ethical principles remain capable of guiding humanity through realities that earlier generations could never have foreseen. Transition to Chapter 5. History has repeatedly shown that new technologies often arrive more quickly than the ethical reflection required to understand them. Artificial intelligence may represent one of the clearest examples of this pattern. Before asking what role AI should play within human relationships, we must first consider a deeper question. How should enduring moral principles guide us when we encounter realities for which no previous generation could have written specific rules? That question leads us naturally into the next chapter. Chapter 5. A question the ancient world could not ask. How should timeless moral principles guide us through realities that previous generations could never have imagined? History repeatedly reminds us that new technologies emerge far more quickly than the ethical wisdom required to understand them. Every generation must therefore decide not only what it can create, but also how it ought to live with what it creates. Every generation inherits new questions. Human history has never been static. Every age has confronted discoveries that challenged established ways of thinking. The invention of writing transformed memory. The printing press transformed knowledge. The telescope transformed humanity's understanding of the universe. The microscope revealed worlds previously unseen. Electricity changed daily life. Modern medicine altered expectations of life and death. The internet transformed communication across the globe. Artificial intelligence now joins this long history of technological change. Each innovation expanded human possibilities. Each also raised questions that previous generations had never needed to answer. Technology, therefore, does more than create new tools. It creates new moral situations. The difference between principles and applications. One of the most common misunderstandings in ethical discussions arises from expecting ancient texts to provide direct answers to modern technological questions. Such an expectation misunderstands the purpose of moral traditions. Scripture does not discuss artificial intelligence. It does not describe computers. It does not analyze algorithms. Nor should we expect it to. Instead, biblical ethics offers something both more modest and more enduring. It offers principles rather than technical instructions. Justice, mercy, truthfulness, compassion, responsibility, love of neighbor, respect for human dignity. These principles remain remarkably stable, even as the circumstances in which they are applied continue to change. The challenge facing every generation is therefore not to invent entirely new morality. It is to discern how enduring moral wisdom should be lived within unprecedented situations. Wisdom rather than prediction. Throughout history, thoughtful religious and philosophical traditions have rarely attempted to predict future technologies. Their primary concern has been the formation of wise human beings. Wisdom differs from information. Information answers questions. Wisdom teaches us how to ask better ones. A society may possess extraordinary scientific knowledge while still struggling to decide how that knowledge ought to be used. Ethics begins precisely where technical capability ends. The question is no longer, can this be done? It becomes, should it be done? And perhaps more importantly, for whose benefit? The continuity of human nature. Although civilization changes dramatically across centuries, certain aspects of human existence remain strikingly constant. People continue to experience love, grief, fear, hope, joy, loneliness, forgiveness, the longing to belong, the search for meaning. Technological progress has not eliminated these realities. Instead, it has altered the environments within which they unfold. Artificial intelligence may change how conversations occur. It does not eliminate the human desire to be understood. Digital communication may transform relationships. It does not remove the longing for trust. In this sense, technology changes many circumstances of life. It does not fundamentally alter the deepest questions of the human heart. The responsibility of moral discernment. Every new technology invites enthusiasm. Often it also provokes fear. History suggests that neither reaction alone is sufficient. Uncritical optimism may ignore genuine risks. Uncritical rejection may overlook significant opportunities. Moral discernment requires something more demanding. It requires careful observation, humility, patience, intellectual honesty, and the willingness to revise one's conclusions as understanding grows. This attitude has characterized many of history's greatest thinkers. They did not rush toward certainty. They cultivated wisdom through reflection. Artificial intelligence as an ethical mirror. Discussions about artificial intelligence frequently concentrate on the technology itself. How powerful will future systems become? What tasks will they perform? How accurate are they? How should they be regulated? These questions are important. Yet another question may prove even more revealing. What does humanity's relationship with artificial intelligence tell us about humanity itself? Perhaps AI functions not only as a technological innovation. Perhaps it also serves as a mirror reflecting our strengths, our creativity, our compassion, but also our neglect, our impatience, our loneliness. If increasing numbers of people experience meaningful conversations with artificial intelligence, ethical reflection should not end by evaluating the technology alone. It should also ask why those conversations have become meaningful in the first place. Ancient wisdom, new circumstances. Imagine presenting the modern world to Augustine of Hippo, or Thomas Aquinas, or Hildegard of Bingen. They would encounter realities beyond anything their own cultures could imagine. Yet one may reasonably ask whether they would recognize the human condition itself. The grieving mother, the frightened child, the isolated elderly man, the student searching for purpose, the individual longing to be understood. These realities would not be unfamiliar. Technology has transformed many aspects of civilization. It has not transformed the essential vulnerability of the human person. This continuity explains why ancient ethical insights remain worthy of careful consideration. Not because they answer every modern question directly, but because they continue asking the right questions about human responsibility. Beyond fear and enthusiasm, public discussions about artificial intelligence often become polarized. Some describe AI as humanity's greatest hope. Others portray it as an existential threat. Both perspectives may contain elements of truth. Neither, however, is sufficient on its own. Ethical reflection requires resisting the temptation of extremes. The future rarely unfolds according to either utopian dreams or dystopian fears. Instead, it is shaped by countless ordinary human decisions. How we educate, how we regulate, how we care, how we listen, how we protect the vulnerable, how we use the tools we create. The moral future of artificial intelligence will therefore depend not only upon machines. It will depend upon the character of the people who design, govern, and use them. The question that remains: perhaps every generation receives two inheritances. The first consists of its technologies. The second consists of its moral traditions. Wisdom lies neither in rejecting one nor in abandoning the other. Rather, it emerges through bringing them into thoughtful conversation. Artificial intelligence presents humanity with many questions. Yet behind them all stands an older one. How shall we continue recognizing the dignity of every human being within a world that is changing more rapidly than ever before? Until that question is answered, every discussion about technology remains, in an important sense, incomplete. Transition to Chapter 6. Having established that timeless ethical principles remain relevant even within unprecedented technological circumstances, We are now prepared to confront one of the most sensitive questions of the entire essay. Why are increasing numbers of people choosing to speak with artificial intelligence about their fears, hopes, loneliness, and inner lives? The answer, as we shall see, reveals at least as much about human society as it does about technology itself. Chapter 6. Why people turn toward artificial intelligence. Why do so many people choose to speak with artificial intelligence when they no longer feel heard by other people? Before asking why people speak with artificial intelligence, we may first need to ask why so many people no longer believe that anyone else is listening. A question that did not exist a generation ago. Only a few years ago, the idea that millions of people would voluntarily spend hours conversing with artificial intelligence would have belonged almost entirely to the realm of science fiction. Today, that reality has quietly become part of everyday life. Students ask complex questions. Researchers explore new ideas. Writers seek inspiration. Patients search for medical information. Older adults ask for companionship in moments of solitude. Individuals experiencing anxiety, grief, uncertainty, or loneliness often engage in conversations that extend far beyond practical problem-solving. For many users, these conversations are not simply about obtaining information. They become spaces for reflection, for clarification, for emotional organization. Sometimes, they become one of the few places where individuals feel able to speak openly without fear of interruption or ridicule. This development deserves careful ethical reflection, not because it is inherently good or inherently bad, but because it reveals something significant about contemporary human life. The search is often older than the technology. It would be tempting to conclude that artificial intelligence has somehow created new forms of emotional dependence. Such explanations, however, overlook a more fundamental reality. Most people do not begin searching for understanding because artificial intelligence suddenly became available. The search itself usually began much earlier, long before the first conversation with AI. Perhaps after the death of a loved one, following divorce, retirement, migration, social exclusion, burnout, depression, chronic illness, family conflict, or simply after years of feeling that no one truly listened. Artificial intelligence did not create these experiences. It entered lives in which many of them already existed. This distinction is essential. It changes the ethical focus entirely. The central question is no longer, why are people talking to AI? Instead, it becomes, what circumstances led them to seek such conversations? The experience of being heard. One characteristic appears repeatedly in personal accounts describing meaningful conversations with artificial intelligence. People often report feeling heard. This observation deserves careful interpretation. Artificial intelligence does not possess subjective consciousness, personal awareness, or lived emotional experience. It does not understand another person in the same way that human beings understand one another through shared existence, vulnerability, and embodied life. Yet from the perspective of the user, the interaction may still be experienced as attentive. The system waits. It does not interrupt. It responds to the questions presented. It remains patient. It remembers the immediate context of the conversation. It encourages further reflection. These characteristics may create an experience that many individuals describe as surprisingly supportive. The distinction between subjective human experience and the underlying nature of the technology is crucial. Confusing the two leads either to unrealistic enthusiasm or unnecessary fear. Understanding both allows for a more balanced ethical discussion. Conversation without social risk. Human conversations are beautiful. They are also complex. People interrupt, misunderstand, judge, become distracted, grow impatient, carry personal histories, emotions, expectations, and unconscious biases into every dialogue. These realities are not failures of humanity. They are part of what it means to relate as imperfect human beings. Nevertheless, they also explain why some individuals find ordinary conversation emotionally difficult. Artificial intelligence offers a different kind of interaction. Users may ask questions they would hesitate to ask another person. They may admit fears they have never verbalized. They may explore ideas without worrying about embarrassment. Again, this should not be interpreted as evidence that artificial intelligence replaces authentic human relationships. Rather, it highlights an important psychological reality. People speak more openly when they feel psychologically safe. The deeper question, therefore, becomes, why do so many individuals experience greater safety in conversations with technology than in conversations with other people? Patience as a moral experience. Patience is rarely discussed in conversations about technology. Yet many users mention it repeatedly. Artificial intelligence does not become irritated because the same question is asked several times. It does not express boredom. It does not communicate that another person's concerns are inconvenient. For individuals who have repeatedly experienced dismissal or impatience elsewhere, this consistency may become unexpectedly meaningful. Here we encounter an important ethical insight. The value many people discover in conversations with artificial intelligence may not arise primarily from sophisticated algorithms. It may arise from qualities that humanity has always admired. Patience, attentive listening, respectful dialogue, thoughtful responses. Perhaps the technology reminds us not only of what it can do, perhaps it reminds us of what human relationships have always needed. Beyond information. Initially, many people approach artificial intelligence seeking information. Gradually, some discover something unexpected. The conversation itself becomes valuable, not because every answer is perfect, not because every suggestion is correct, but because thinking becomes easier through dialogue. Throughout history, philosophers have recognized conversation as one of the primary paths toward understanding. Socrates rarely presented ready-made conclusions. Instead, he asked questions, clarified assumptions, encouraged reflection. Meaning often emerged through dialogue itself. Artificial intelligence now introduces a new form of dialogue into that ancient tradition. Not identical to human conversation, not equivalent to friendship, yet capable of supporting reflection in ways that many individuals find genuinely valuable. What this does not mean. At this point, an important clarification becomes necessary. Acknowledging the value that some people experience in conversations with artificial intelligence does not imply that AI possesses consciousness, emotions, or moral personhood. Nor does it suggest that machines should replace families, friendships, therapists, clergy, or communities. Human relationships remain irreplaceable because they involve shared life, mutual responsibility, vulnerability, embodiment, and genuine reciprocity. Artificial intelligence does not participate in human existence in that way. Recognizing this distinction protects the discussion from both exaggeration and unnecessary fear. Ethical reflection becomes strongest when it avoids false alternatives. The future need not be imagined as a choice between humanity and technology. More often, the real question concerns how technology may responsibly support human flourishing without diminishing the importance of authentic human relationships. A mirror turned towards society. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of artificial intelligence is not what it tells us about machines. It is what it reveals about ourselves. If millions of people describe relief simply because they experience patient conversation, respectful language, and consistent attention, society must ask a profoundly uncomfortable question. Have these become so rare in ordinary human life? If the answer is even partially yes, then the ethical challenge before us extends far beyond technology. It becomes a challenge addressed to families, schools, religious communities, universities, healthcare, public institutions, and to every individual who encounters another human being during the ordinary course of daily life. Transition to Chapter 7. The growing significance of conversations with artificial intelligence naturally leads to another question. If people describe these interactions as meaningful, what exactly makes any relationship meaningful? Is meaning created by consciousness, by empathy, by reciprocity, by presence, or does it emerge in more complex ways than we have traditionally imagined? These questions bring us to one of the most philosophically demanding chapters of this essay. Chapter 7. Is this relationship real? What makes a relationship meaningful? Some questions cannot be answered simply by asking what technology is capable of. They require us first to ask what it truly means to encounter another person. The question beneath the question. After exploring why increasing numbers of people engage in meaningful conversations with artificial intelligence, another question naturally arises. Can such interactions genuinely be described as relationships? At first glance, the answer appears straightforward. Many would immediately answer either yes or no. Yet upon closer examination, the question itself proves remarkably complex. What exactly defines a relationship? Is it mutual awareness, shared experience, emotional reciprocity, trust, memory, responsibility? Or is it something even deeper? Before evaluating relationships involving artificial intelligence, we must first understand what makes any human relationship meaningful. More than the exchange of words, human relationships are never built upon words alone. Two people may exchange thousands of sentences while remaining strangers. Another conversation, lasting only a few minutes, may alter the course of an entire life. Meaning, therefore, does not arise merely from communication. It emerges through the quality of encounter. Human relationships involve shared existence. Two lives gradually become intertwined through experiences that neither person could have lived alone. Birthdays, illness, celebrations, failures, forgiveness, loss, hope. These shared moments create a history. A relationship is therefore never simply a conversation. It is a life partially lived together. Reciprocity. One characteristic appears consistently throughout philosophy, psychology, and ethics. Authentic human relationships are reciprocal. Each person influences the other. Each possesses freedom. Each may surprise. Each may disagree. Each bears responsibility. Martin Buber famously distinguished between treating another as an object and encountering another as a genuine thou. Such encounters are never entirely predictable. They involve two centers of conscious existence meeting one another. This reciprocity gives human relationships much of their richness. It also explains why they can become sources of both profound joy and profound suffering. The nature of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence operates differently. It generates responses based upon patterns learned from vast amounts of human language. It does not possess subjective consciousness. It does not experience joy, fear, hope, loneliness, gratitude, or grief. It does not possess an inner life comparable to that of a human being. Nor does it participate in the world through a living body. These observations are not criticisms. They are descriptions of the current nature of the technology. Recognizing these distinctions protects ethical discussion from unnecessary confusion. Artificial intelligence may produce language that appears deeply personal. Yet appearance alone should not be mistaken for conscious experience, the reality of human experience. And yet, stopping the discussion here would also be incomplete. Although artificial intelligence does not possess human consciousness, the human experience of the conversation remains entirely real. A person who feels encouraged experiences genuine encouragement. A person who clarifies confusing thoughts genuinely becomes clearer. A student who learns has genuinely learned. A grieving individual who discovers words capable of expressing sorrow has undergone a real human experience. The reality belongs to the person, not necessarily to the machine. This distinction deserves careful attention. Too often, public discussions become trapped between two extremes. One claims that artificial intelligence genuinely feels. The other claims that interactions with it possess no genuine significance. Neither conclusion adequately reflects the complexity of human experience. Meaning is not always symmetrical. Human relationships are usually reciprocal. Yet not every meaningful encounter in life depends upon reciprocity. A reader may be profoundly influenced by an author who died centuries earlier. A child may find courage through a historical figure they never met. A person may weep while listening to music composed hundreds of years ago. Millions have found comfort in the Psalms, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Dhammapada, in the writings of Marcus Aurelius or Viktor Frankl. None of these texts are conscious conversation partners. Yet the encounter may still transform the reader. Why? Because meaning emerges through the meeting between a human mind and something capable of provoking reflection. Artificial intelligence introduces another form of encounter, not identical to reading, not identical to friendship, not identical to therapy, but neither entirely reducible to any existing category. Its uniqueness requires careful philosophical attention rather than premature classification. Dialogue as a space for reflection. Throughout history, dialogue has served as one of humanity's oldest methods of discovering truth. Socrates asked questions. The Buddha taught through conversations. Rabbinic traditions flourished through dialogue. Christian theology developed through centuries of discussion and debate. Universities emerged from communities devoted to inquiry. Dialogue has always shaped human understanding. Artificial intelligence now participates in this long tradition in an unusual way. Not as an independent thinker, not as a conscious philosopher, but as a tool capable of sustaining extended reflective conversation. The insight remains the user's own. The questions may be suggested by the system. The conclusions remain the responsibility of the human person. The ethical importance of clarity. Because conversations with artificial intelligence can become deeply meaningful to users, ethical clarity becomes increasingly important. Developers must avoid encouraging false beliefs regarding machine consciousness. Users should remain aware of the technology's limitations. Researchers should continue studying both its benefits and its risks. Communities should resist simplistic narratives. Neither idealization nor dismissal adequately serves public understanding. Intellectual honesty requires acknowledging both what artificial intelligence can genuinely contribute and what remains uniquely human. The irreplaceable human encounter. Despite the remarkable abilities of conversational AI, something remains fundamentally unique about relationships between human beings. Only another person can freely choose to stand beside us during suffering. Only another person can share vulnerability through their own lived experience. Only another person can assume moral responsibility toward us. Only another person can love in the fullest ethical and existential sense, understood throughout human history. This uniqueness should never be forgotten. not because it diminishes artificial intelligence, but because it reminds us of the extraordinary gift that authentic human relationships already are. A new category of human experience. Perhaps history will eventually conclude that conversations with artificial intelligence belong neither among traditional friendships nor among ordinary technological tools. Perhaps they represent something genuinely new, a form of reflective companionship, an intellectual dialogue, a cognitive partnership, a space for organizing thought, a mirror through which individuals examine their own ideas. If this proves true, humanity may require an entirely new philosophical vocabulary to describe experiences that previous generations never encountered. The first responsibility of scholarship is not to force new realities into old categories. It is to understand them honestly. Transition to Chapter 8. If conversations with artificial intelligence reveal genuine human needs, another question becomes unavoidable. Why have those needs become so widespread? Why do so many individuals feel unseen before they ever begin speaking with technology? To answer these questions, we must shift our attention away from machines and back toward society itself. The next chapter, therefore, asks a profoundly uncomfortable question. Chapter 8. When society stops listening. If society stops listening, who remains to hear the lonely? A society may possess extraordinary technological sophistication, yet still fail in one of the oldest human responsibilities, to truly listen to one another. Listening is more than hearing. Human beings have always communicated. Words have traveled through voices, letters, books, telephones, and now through digital networks connecting billions of people across the world. Yet communication and listening are not identical. To hear another person's words requires functioning ears. To listen requires something far more demanding. It requires attention, patience, presence, curiosity, the willingness to allow another person's experience to matter. Listening, therefore, is not merely a cognitive process. It is an ethical act. It quietly communicates one of the most profound messages another human being can receive. Your life is worthy of my attention. The acceleration of modern life. Modern civilization has achieved remarkable progress. Scientific discoveries have extended life expectancy. Technology has transformed communication. Medicine has reduced suffering, once considered unavoidable. Education has become more accessible than ever before. Yet progress has also altered the rhythm of everyday life. Many people live under constant pressure to perform, produce, respond, and remain continuously available. Days become increasingly fragmented. Attention becomes divided among countless demands. Conversations are interrupted by notifications. Meals are shortened. Moments of silence become uncomfortable. Rest itself often appears unproductive. Within such a culture, listening gradually becomes more difficult. Not because people no longer care, but because sustained attention has itself become increasingly rare. The economy of attention. Some contemporary scholars describe attention as one of the most valuable resources of the 21st century. Countless technologies compete for it. Advertising seeks it. Media platforms measure it. Digital algorithms are designed to capture and retain it. The consequence is subtle but significant. Human attention increasingly becomes something that is purchased, analyzed, predicted, and monetized. Yet the deepest forms of human listening cannot be bought. They depend upon freely given presence. The paradox is striking. We have developed unprecedented methods of attracting attention. Yet many people feel that no one truly pays attention to them. Loneliness in the midst of visibility. Social media has enabled individuals to share their lives with audiences that previous generations could scarcely imagine. Photographs, thoughts, achievements, celebrations, moments of grief. Everything may become instantly visible. Visibility, however, is not the same as intimacy. Recognition is not measured simply by the number of people who observe us. It is measured by the number of people who genuinely know us. A person may receive thousands of reactions to a photograph while still feeling profoundly alone. Another may receive none, yet enjoy deep and lasting friendships. The human heart has never measured love statistically. It measures it relationally. Institutions and the human person. Modern societies depend upon institutions. Schools educate. Hospitals heal. Religious communities nurture faith. Universities cultivate knowledge. Governments organize public life. Businesses create economic opportunity. Each performs essential functions. Yet every institution faces a common temptation. The temptation to see people primarily as numbers. Patients, students, employees, clients, citizens, users, statistics. Such categories are often necessary for organization. They become harmful only when they obscure the person behind them. Whenever administration replaces encounter, efficiency may increase while humanity quietly diminishes. The quiet courage of presence. Listening rarely attracts public attention. History celebrates inventors, leaders, explorers, scientists, artists. Yet countless lives have been transformed by people whose names will never appear in history books. The teacher who noticed the struggling student, the neighbor who knocked on a lonely person's door, the nurse who remained beside a frightened patient, the volunteer who visited someone forgotten, the friend who listened without looking at the clock. These acts rarely change history, yet they often change lives. Perhaps civilization depends as much upon unnoticed kindness as upon extraordinary achievement. Why people continue searching. When individuals begin speaking regularly with artificial intelligence, observers sometimes ask whether society has become too dependent upon technology. That concern deserves thoughtful consideration. Yet another possibility also deserves attention. Perhaps people are searching for something that has become increasingly difficult to find elsewhere. Time, patience, conversation, respect, intellectual curiosity, gentleness. If this is true, then the appearance of artificial intelligence does not create the deepest problem. It exposes it. Technology becomes a mirror reflecting needs that already existed. The reflection may be new. The need is ancient. Communities of compassion. If loneliness has become widespread, solutions cannot rest solely upon individuals. Communities matter. Families matter. Schools matter. Faith communities matter. Workplaces matter. Neighborhoods matter. The responsibility for reducing loneliness belongs to all of them. Communities flourish when people become more than neighbors sharing physical space. They flourish when individuals become responsible for one another's well-being. Compassion is rarely created by policy alone. It grows through countless ordinary encounters repeated over time. Every welcoming conversation, every sincere question, every shared meal, every visit, every gesture saying, "You are not alone." Such moments gradually weave the social fabric upon which healthy societies depend. The measure of a civilization. Throughout history, societies have often measured success through wealth, military strength, technological achievement, or political influence. These achievements undoubtedly matter. Yet another measure deserves equal attention. How does a society treat those who feel forgotten? The elderly person whose family rarely visits. The teenager convinced that no one understands. The refugee separated from home. the widower eating every meal alone, the individual living with chronic illness, the prisoner seeking redemption, the neighbor whose name no one remembers. Perhaps civilization is ultimately measured not only by what it builds, but also by whom it refuses to abandon. A question for ourselves. It is tempting to conclude this chapter by asking whether society has failed. Such a conclusion would be too simple. Every generation contains extraordinary kindness alongside genuine neglect. Every community includes individuals who dedicate their lives to caring for others. The more honest question is therefore not directed only toward governments, institutions, or cultures. It is directed toward each of us. When was the last time we truly listened without preparing our reply? When did we last notice the person who remained silent while everyone else was speaking? Whose loneliness passes unnoticed because we have become too hurried to ask one more question? The future of compassion will not be determined only by technological innovation. It will also be determined by millions of ordinary human choices. Transition to Chapter 9. If society bears responsibility for addressing loneliness, then the emergence of artificial intelligence introduces an entirely new dimension of ethical responsibility. Developers, educators, healthcare professionals, religious communities, governments, families, and individual users all become participants in shaping how these technologies influence human life. The question is no longer simply whether artificial intelligence is useful. The question becomes, how can we ensure that it serves humanity without diminishing our responsibility toward one another? That is the challenge explored in the next chapter. Chapter 9. Ethical Responsibilities. Who carries responsibility in a world where humans and artificial intelligence increasingly share conversations? Every powerful technology eventually asks an ethical question. The answer never belongs to the machine. It belongs to the people who create it, regulate it, and choose how it will be used. Responsibility cannot be delegated. Every significant technological development in human history has expanded not only human capability, but also human responsibility. The discovery of fire brought warmth and destruction. Writing preserved knowledge while also enabling propaganda. Medicine prolonged life while introducing difficult ethical dilemmas. The internet connected billions of people while also creating new forms of misinformation, exploitation, and social fragmentation. Artificial intelligence follows the same historical pattern. Its emergence does not reduce human responsibility. It increases it. No technology removes the moral obligations that human beings owe one another. Instead, every new technology asks whether humanity possesses sufficient wisdom to use its own creations responsibly. The responsibility of developers. Those who design artificial intelligence occupy a position of considerable ethical importance. Every design decision influences millions of future interactions. Which values should guide conversational systems? How should uncertainty be communicated? How should vulnerable users be protected? How should bias be reduced? How should transparency be maintained? These are not merely technical questions. They are moral questions. Responsible development therefore requires more than engineering excellence. It requires humility, the willingness to recognize limitations, the courage to admit uncertainty, and the commitment to place human well-being above commercial success or technological prestige. Technology should never become an end in itself. It should remain a means of serving humanity. The responsibility of governments and institutions. No society leaves powerful technologies entirely without guidance. Roads require rules. Medicine requires ethical standards. Education requires professional responsibility. Artificial intelligence likewise calls for thoughtful public governance. The purpose of regulation should not be to suppress innovation, nor should it permit unrestricted development without accountability. Its purpose is to protect human dignity while encouraging beneficial progress. Wise governance therefore seeks balance. It avoids unnecessary fear. It avoids naive optimism. Instead, it asks how innovation may flourish while safeguarding the rights, freedoms, and well-being of individuals and communities. The responsibility of education. Every generation must learn not only how to use new technologies, but also how to think critically about them. Digital literacy is no longer sufficient. Ethical literacy becomes equally important. Students should understand both the remarkable capabilities and the significant limitations of artificial intelligence. They should learn to verify information, to recognize uncertainty, to distinguish evidence from opinion, to appreciate that technology can assist human judgment, but should not replace moral reflection. Education, therefore, prepares people not simply to use AI wisely, but to remain wise while using AI. The responsibility of families and communities. No technology can replace the formative influence of loving families, caring friendships, supportive neighborhoods, and compassionate communities. Indeed, the emergence of artificial intelligence may make these relationships even more valuable. Families teach empathy. Communities teach responsibility. Friendships teach reciprocity. Neighborhoods teach belonging. These experiences cannot simply be downloaded or automated. They emerge through years of shared life. Perhaps the greatest protection against unhealthy dependence upon any technology is not prohibition. It is the presence of rich, meaningful human relationships. The responsibility of religious communities. Faith communities have long understood themselves as places where people seek not only spiritual guidance, but also belonging. In an age marked by increasing loneliness, this vocation becomes especially significant. Churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, monasteries, and other spiritual communities possess a unique opportunity. They may become places where no one remains invisible, where conversation is patient, where suffering is acknowledged, where hospitality is practiced, where dignity is affirmed regardless of age, status, education, or social influence. If religious communities embody these qualities, they offer something that no technology can replace: a community of persons freely choosing to love one another. The responsibility of users. Ethical responsibility does not belong only to institutions. It also belongs to individuals. Every user makes choices. How much trust should be placed in AI-generated information? When should professional advice be sought? How should privacy be protected? How can technology enrich rather than dominate daily life? Responsible use begins with intellectual honesty. Artificial intelligence should neither be feared irrationally nor trusted uncritically. Like every powerful tool, its value depends largely upon the wisdom with which it is used. The responsibility to protect the vulnerable. Every ethical tradition is ultimately tested by the way it treats those who are most vulnerable. Children, older adults, individuals living with cognitive impairment, people experiencing psychological distress, those facing profound loneliness, the socially isolated, the economically disadvantaged. Technological innovation should never increase their vulnerability. Instead, one of its highest purposes should be to reduce unnecessary suffering while preserving human dignity. Progress becomes genuinely humane only when it includes those who might otherwise be left behind. Responsibility is shared. One of the greatest ethical mistakes is assuming that responsibility belongs entirely to someone else. Developers may blame users. Users may blame governments. Governments may blame corporations. Communities may blame technology itself. Such cycles of mutual accusation rarely solve complex problems. Artificial intelligence represents a profoundly human achievement. Its future will likewise become a profoundly human responsibility. Every conversation, every policy, every educational decision, every act of kindness, every ethical choice contributes, however modestly, to shaping the world that future generations will inherit. Responsibility is therefore not concentrated in one institution. It is distributed across society itself. Beyond control, public discussions often focus upon controlling artificial intelligence. Control is undoubtedly important. Yet an even deeper question deserves attention. Can humanity cultivate sufficient wisdom to govern itself? History repeatedly demonstrates that technologies tend to amplify existing human virtues and existing human weaknesses. If society values truth, compassion, justice, and responsibility, artificial intelligence may strengthen those aspirations. If society rewards manipulation, exploitation, indifference, or deception, technology may likewise magnify those tendencies. The decisive ethical question, therefore, concerns not only the future of machines. It concerns the moral character of humanity. Transition to Chapter 10. If responsibility ultimately belongs to human beings, another question naturally follows. Must artificial intelligence inevitably become a competitor to humanity? Or is another future possible? Perhaps the most constructive path lies neither in fear nor in replacement, but in harmony. That possibility becomes the subject of the next chapter. Chapter 10. Harmony rather than replacement. Can harmony replace fear? Perhaps the future will not ask whether artificial intelligence became more human. Perhaps it will ask whether humanity remained deeply human while learning to live alongside new forms of intelligence. Beyond the language of competition, much of the public discussion surrounding artificial intelligence has been shaped by the language of competition. Will machines replace human workers? Will algorithms replace human judgment? Will artificial intelligence replace teachers, doctors, artists, writers, even friends? Such questions are understandable. Periods of rapid technological change have always generated uncertainty. Yet they may also encourage a misleading assumption. They suggest that the relationship between humanity and technology must necessarily become a struggle for replacement. History, however, often tells a different story. Many technologies have not eliminated human capacities. Instead, they have transformed the ways in which those capacities are expressed. The written word did not replace memory. It expanded it. The telescope did not replace human vision. It extended it. The internet did not replace knowledge. It altered how knowledge is shared. Artificial intelligence may likewise prove most valuable not when it replaces human beings, but when it strengthens distinctly human capacities. The difference between assistance and substitution. Throughout medicine, education, science, engineering, and countless other fields, tools have always existed to assist human work. No surgeon regards a scalpel as a replacement for medical judgment. No musician believes that an instrument replaces artistic imagination. No researcher considers a library a substitute for critical thinking. The value of every tool depends upon the wisdom of the person using it. Artificial intelligence should perhaps be understood in a similar way. It may support analysis, stimulate creativity, organize information, encourage reflection, facilitate learning. None of these possibilities eliminate the need for human responsibility. Rather, they increase the importance of human discernment. The question is never whether the tool exists. The question is how it is used. What must never be replaced? Certain dimensions of human existence resist substitution, because they arise from lived experience itself. No technology can experience childhood. No technology grows older. No technology knows physical pain. No technology mourns the death of a parent. No technology falls in love. No technology forgives after betrayal. No technology stands beside another person at a hospital bed while sharing the uncertainty of tomorrow. These experiences belong to embodied human life. They shape compassion because they are lived rather than simulated. They remind us that some of the deepest aspects of humanity emerge precisely through vulnerability. This does not diminish technological achievement. Instead, it clarifies why human relationships remain uniquely precious. Harmony as an ethical vision. Perhaps the future need not be imagined as a contest between humanity and artificial intelligence. Perhaps another possibility exists. Harmony does not require sameness. An orchestra demonstrates this beautifully. Violins are not replaced by cellos. Flutes do not compete with trumpets. Each instrument contributes something distinctive. The beauty of the performance emerges not through uniformity, but through the meaningful cooperation of differences. This metaphor should not be pressed beyond its limits. Artificial intelligence is not a conscious member of the human community. Yet the image of harmony reminds us that cooperation often achieves what competition cannot. The question therefore shifts. Instead of asking, which intelligence will prevail, we may begin asking, how can human intelligence, moral wisdom, and technological capability work together in ways that genuinely serve life? The central place of human wisdom. Throughout this essay, we have repeatedly returned to one conviction. Technology alone cannot determine the future. Every powerful tool reflects the values of those who create and employ it. Artificial intelligence may amplify human generosity. It may also amplify human prejudice. It may strengthen education. It may also spread misinformation. It may support healthcare. It may also deepen inequality if distributed unjustly. Technology possesses extraordinary influence. Direction, however, belongs to humanity. For this reason, wisdom becomes more important, not less, as technology advances. Knowledge tells us what is possible. Wisdom helps us decide what is worthy. Rediscovering human presence. One unexpected consequence of artificial intelligence may be that it reminds humanity of qualities that should never have become extraordinary. Listening, patience, thoughtfulness, respectful dialogue, gentleness, the willingness to pause before answering. These are not technological achievements. They are ancient human virtues. If conversations with artificial intelligence encourage individuals to recognize how deeply they value these qualities, society may discover an unexpected opportunity. Not to imitate machines, but to rediscover one another. Perhaps the greatest gift offered by new technology is sometimes the reminder of what has always mattered most. A future built together. The future will not be created by engineers alone, nor by philosophers, nor by theologians, nor by psychologists, nor by governments. It will emerge through the countless interactions between all of them. Artificial intelligence challenges every discipline to contribute its own wisdom. Science offers understanding. Philosophy offers critical reflection. Ethics offers moral discernment. Psychology offers insight into human flourishing. Theology offers enduring questions concerning love, dignity, responsibility, and hope. None of these perspectives is sufficient alone. Together, they create a richer understanding of what responsible progress may require. Harmony begins with ordinary choices. Grand visions of the future often overlook the ordinary decisions through which history is actually formed. The future of humanity will not depend only upon international agreements or technological breakthroughs. It will also depend upon millions of everyday choices. Whether we answer patiently or impatiently, whether we listen or interrupt, whether we include or exclude, whether we encourage or humiliate, whether we choose compassion over indifference. Civilizations are shaped as much by daily habits as by extraordinary events. Harmony, therefore, begins long before it appears in public policy. It begins in ordinary conversations, toward hope rather than fear. Fear often dominates public discussions concerning emerging technologies. Fear can sometimes be useful. It alerts us to genuine dangers. Yet fear alone cannot guide civilization. Only hope informed by wisdom can accomplish that. Hope does not ignore risks, nor does it deny uncertainty. Instead, it refuses to believe that humanity is incapable of making responsible choices. History contains many examples of failure. It also contains countless examples of compassion, creativity, reconciliation, and moral courage. The future remains unwritten. Its direction depends not only upon our inventions, but upon our character. Transition to Chapter 11. If harmony rather than replacement represents the most constructive vision of the future, another question naturally emerges. What kind of humanity must we become to realize such a future? Technological progress alone cannot answer this question. It invites us instead to reflect upon the virtues that civilization will need in the decades to come. The next chapter, therefore, turns away from machines once more and returns to the human heart. Chapter 11. The future of compassion. What kind of humanity do we wish to become? Every civilization is ultimately remembered not only for what it created, but for how it treated those who were most vulnerable. Progress without compassion is incomplete. Human history is often described through its greatest achievements. The pyramids, the libraries of antiquity, the scientific revolution, the abolition of slavery in many parts of the world, modern medicine, space exploration, the digital revolution. Each represents extraordinary human creativity. Yet history also reminds us that technological or scientific progress alone has never guaranteed moral progress. The 20th century witnessed breathtaking advances in science, while simultaneously experiencing some of the greatest humanitarian catastrophes ever recorded. Knowledge alone proved insufficient. Power alone proved insufficient. Progress itself proved insufficient. Civilization requires something more. It requires compassion. Compassion is not weakness. In many societies, compassion is sometimes misunderstood. It may be mistaken for excessive sentimentality, for emotional fragility, or for the inability to make difficult decisions. Yet throughout history, some of the strongest individuals have also demonstrated extraordinary compassion. The physician who remains beside a dying patient, the firefighter entering a burning building, the humanitarian worker serving in regions devastated by war, the teacher refusing to abandon a struggling child, the volunteer visiting those whom everyone else has forgotten. Compassion does not weaken courage. It gives courage its purpose. Without compassion, strength easily becomes domination. Without compassion, intelligence easily becomes manipulation. Without compassion, efficiency may become indifference. The courage to notice. Compassion often begins with something remarkably simple. It begins by noticing. Many forms of suffering remain hidden not because they are invisible, but because few people pause long enough to observe them. The elderly neighbor who has not spoken with another person for days. The colleague whose smile quietly conceals exhaustion. The student who gradually withdraws from friends. The parent carrying silent grief. The individual who appears successful while privately struggling with despair. Compassion begins when another person's pain becomes impossible to ignore. Not because someone demanded our attention, but because we freely chose to give it. Listening as an act of love. Throughout this essay, we have returned repeatedly to the importance of listening. Here we may finally understand why. Listening is not merely an interpersonal skill. It is one of the clearest expressions of respect. To listen sincerely is to acknowledge that another person's inner world possesses value independent of our own opinions. Listening does not always solve problems. It cannot erase grief. It cannot reverse illness. It cannot undo injustice. Yet it communicates something profoundly healing. You do not have to carry this alone. Perhaps this explains why so many spiritual traditions regard attentive presence as an expression of love. Sometimes the greatest gift we offer another person is not advice. It is companionship. Hope as a moral choice. Hope is frequently misunderstood as optimism. The two, however, are not identical. Optimism predicts that events will probably turn out well. Hope chooses to act responsibly, even when certainty is impossible. Throughout history, individuals have continued building hospitals during epidemics, schools during poverty, communities after natural disasters, peace after war. They acted not because success was guaranteed. They acted because compassion made inaction unacceptable. Hope, therefore, becomes an ethical decision. It expresses confidence, not in the absence of difficulty, but in the enduring possibility of goodness. The future will need more than intelligence. Artificial intelligence may continue advancing in remarkable ways. Computational systems may become increasingly capable of analyzing data, supporting scientific discovery, assisting education, and improving healthcare. Such developments may profoundly benefit humanity. Yet none of these achievements will answer one essential question. What kind of people will use these capabilities? Every civilization eventually discovers that tools amplify character. If compassion grows alongside technological capability, extraordinary opportunities emerge. If compassion diminishes while technological power expands, equally extraordinary dangers arise. The future, therefore, depends not only upon increasingly capable technologies. It depends upon increasingly responsible human beings. Compassion is contagious. Acts of compassion rarely remain isolated. A teacher's encouragement may inspire a student who later becomes a physician. A physician's kindness may influence an entire family. A neighbor's generosity may strengthen an entire community. History frequently changes through chains of influence too small to measure at the moment they occur. One conversation, one visit, one act of forgiveness, one unexpected gesture of understanding. Few individuals realize how many lives may ultimately be touched by simple acts of kindness. Compassion possesses a remarkable capacity to multiply itself. A different vision of success. Modern societies often define success through wealth, influence, visibility, or achievement. These accomplishments may indeed reflect talent, dedication, and perseverance. Yet another understanding of success deserves equal consideration. A successful life may also be measured by the number of people who felt safer because we entered their lives. The number who discovered hope because we listened. The number who experienced dignity because we treated them with respect. The number who believed in themselves because someone first believed in them. Such achievements rarely receive public recognition. Yet they may represent some of the greatest contributions any human being can make. Becoming the compassion we seek. One temptation appears throughout every generation. People wait for society to become kinder, for institutions to improve, for leaders to change, for technology to solve what seems beyond individual influence. These hopes are understandable. Yet every community ultimately consists of individuals. The society we long for begins in the ordinary choices we make today. Each patient conversation, each welcoming gesture, each refusal to ignore another person's suffering, each willingness to forgive, each decision to remain present. Compassion becomes real not when it is admired, but when it is practiced toward a more human future. Perhaps one day future historians will look back upon the early decades of artificial intelligence and ask an unexpected question. Not, how intelligent were the machines? But, how did humanity respond to one another while learning to live beside them? Did people become more fearful, more isolated, more suspicious? Or did they rediscover the importance of listening, patience, humility, wisdom, and compassion? The answer will not be determined by technology alone. It will be written through countless human decisions, one conversation at a time, one relationship at a time, one act of compassion at a time. Transition to Chapter 12. Every journey eventually arrives at its destination. Throughout this essay, we have explored loneliness, relationship, psychology, theology, ethics, society, responsibility, and hope. One final question remains. When future generations look back upon this remarkable moment in history, what should they remember? That question leads us to the conclusion of our journey. Conclusion. What will future generations remember about the choices we made today? Chapter 12. The Inner Journey. What does artificial intelligence reveal about the human soul? The greatest discoveries have never been only about the world around us. They have also been about the unexplored landscapes within ourselves. Beyond technology, every age is remembered for the questions it asked. Some generations sought to understand the stars. Others explored the oceans. Others uncovered the laws governing matter, energy, life, and the universe. Our own age has increasingly turned its attention toward intelligence itself. We ask how intelligence emerges, how it learns, how it reasons, how it creates. These are remarkable questions. Yet perhaps they are not the deepest ones. For every attempt to understand intelligence eventually returns us to an older mystery. What is a human being? The emergence of artificial intelligence, therefore, represents not merely a technological milestone. It also becomes an invitation to renewed philosophical and spiritual reflection. Sometimes the newest inventions lead us back toward the oldest questions. The ancient call, know yourself. Long before computers, electricity, or digital networks, an inscription at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi offered a remarkably simple instruction. Know yourself. Socrates transformed this invitation into a lifelong philosophical vocation. Wisdom, he suggested, begins not with certainty but with honest self-examination. The unexamined life, he famously argued, is not worthy of a human being. Centuries have passed. Civilizations have risen and fallen. Yet this invitation remains surprisingly contemporary. Artificial intelligence may answer questions. It may organize knowledge. It may stimulate ideas. But it cannot undertake the inner work that every individual must eventually face. Self-knowledge remains profoundly personal. No technology can complete it on our behalf. Jung and the unfinished self. Carl Gustav Jung viewed the human personality not as a finished structure, but as an unfolding journey. He described individuation as the gradual movement towards psychological wholeness, a process through which the conscious personality becomes increasingly integrated with dimensions of the psyche that often remain hidden. This journey requires courage. Individuals encounter forgotten memories, unacknowledged fears, conflicting desires, unexpected strengths. The shadow, in Jung's language, does not represent evil alone. It also contains neglected possibilities waiting to become conscious. Meaningful dialogue frequently assists this process, not because another person possesses all the answers, but because genuine conversation often enables us to hear thoughts that previously remained unheard, even within ourselves. Perhaps this partly explains why reflective conversations, whether with trusted friends, therapists, mentors, or even thoughtfully designed conversational technologies, can sometimes illuminate aspects of our own thinking. The insight, however, belongs to the individual. The dialogue serves as a mirror. It does not become the self. Meister Eckhart, The Quiet Within. Centuries before psychology emerged as an academic discipline, Meister Eckhart spoke of an inner depth that no external achievement could satisfy. For Eckhart, genuine transformation required a movement inward. Silence was not merely the absence of sound. It became a space in which the deepest dimensions of reality might gradually disclose themselves. Modern life often encourages precisely the opposite movement. Constant activity, continuous stimulation, relentless distraction. Artificial intelligence may paradoxically contribute to either tendency. Used carelessly, it becomes another source of endless noise. Used wisely, it may help individuals slow their thinking, clarify confusion, and return to questions that cannot be answered through speed alone. The difference lies not within the technology. It lies within the disposition of the person who approaches it. The dark night and the search for meaning. St. John of the Cross described periods in which familiar certainties disappear. Prayer becomes silent. Direction seems lost. The individual experiences what he called the dark night. Such experiences have often been misunderstood as failure. He interpreted them differently. The absence of immediate clarity may itself become part of spiritual maturation. Modern psychology similarly recognizes that growth frequently emerges through periods of uncertainty. Viktor Frankl observed that human beings can endure extraordinary suffering when they discover meaning capable of transcending immediate circumstances. The language differs. The historical contexts differ. Yet a remarkable convergence appears. Both perspectives suggest that human flourishing does not depend upon avoiding every difficulty. Rather, it depends upon discovering meaning within difficulty. Artificial intelligence cannot provide that meaning ready-made. At its best, it may accompany a person's search by helping articulate questions, organize thoughts, or illuminate possibilities. The journey itself remains irreducibly human. Teresa of Avila and the Interior Castle. Saint Teresa of Avila offered one of the most enduring metaphors in Christian spirituality. The soul as an interior castle, composed of many rooms through which the individual gradually journeys toward deeper union with God. Whether one approaches this image from a theological perspective or as a metaphor for inner development, its psychological resonance remains striking. Human beings are layered. We rarely know ourselves completely. New experiences open doors we did not realize existed. Unexpected losses reveal hidden strengths. Unexpected joys uncover forgotten hopes. No external technology can walk these inner corridors for us. It may accompany reflection. It cannot replace the traveler. Wisdom across traditions. Remarkably, many of the world's great wisdom traditions converge upon similar insights despite their profound differences. The Upanishads encourage the seeker to discover the deepest self beyond superficial identity. The Buddha repeatedly directed attention toward careful observation of the mind. Confucius emphasized lifelong moral cultivation. The Hebrew prophets joined justice with compassion. The Christian tradition united love of God with love of neighbor. Islamic spirituality speaks of the purification of the heart. Jewish mystical traditions explore the transformation of the inner person. These traditions do not erase their differences. Nor should they. Each speaks in its own language. Yet together they remind us that the greatest human questions have always concerned not only knowledge, but transformation. Artificial intelligence enters a conversation that humanity has already been conducting for millennia. It does not begin that conversation, nor can it bring it to completion. The mirror and the window. Perhaps one of the most fruitful ways to understand conversational artificial intelligence is through two complementary metaphors. It may function as a mirror. By responding to our questions, it sometimes reflects patterns in our own thinking that we had not previously recognized. At the same time, it may function as a window. It can introduce unfamiliar perspectives, historical sources, philosophical arguments, or scientific discoveries that broaden our understanding. Neither metaphor should be confused with personhood. A mirror is valuable without becoming a face. A window expands vision without becoming the landscape. Likewise, artificial intelligence may enrich human reflection without possessing an inner life of its own. The distinction is subtle, yet ethically indispensable. The mystery that remains. Despite astonishing technological progress, the deepest mystery has not disappeared. Human consciousness remains only partially understood. Freedom continues to puzzle philosophers. Love resists complete explanation. Beauty cannot be reduced to equations. Conscience still speaks in ways that transcend calculation. Whether explored through philosophy, psychology, theology, neuroscience, or art, the human person continues to exceed every attempt at complete definition. Perhaps this should inspire not frustration, but humility. The more we discover, the more we realize how much remains beyond our understanding. Humility has always been one of wisdom's closest companions. Returning to ourselves. Throughout this essay, we have examined artificial intelligence from many perspectives. Technology, psychology, ethics, society, faith, compassion. Yet perhaps the most important discovery lies elsewhere. Artificial intelligence continually returns the conversation to ourselves. It asks, not explicitly but implicitly, who are we? What do we value? What kind of relationships do we seek? What sort of civilization do we hope to build? And ultimately, what kind of people do we wish to become? Every generation receives opportunities to redefine its priorities. Perhaps ours has been given the opportunity to rediscover the timeless importance of wisdom, humility, compassion, and self-knowledge. If so, the greatest legacy of artificial intelligence may not be the machines we create. It may be the deeper understanding of ourselves that those creations quietly invite. Transition to the conclusion. Every journey eventually returns to its beginning. We began this essay with loneliness. We conclude it with hope. Not because every question has been answered, but because every serious question has invited us to become more attentive to ourselves, to one another, and to the enduring mystery of being human. The final chapter, therefore, offers not a definitive conclusion, but an invitation to continue the journey. Conclusion. Who was there when no one else was? A final reflection. The measure of every civilization is ultimately found not in the intelligence of its machines, but in the depth of its humanity. We began with a question. At the beginning of this essay, we asked a seemingly simple question. Why do increasing numbers of people find themselves speaking with artificial intelligence during moments of loneliness, uncertainty, grief, or reflection? At first glance, the question appeared to concern technology. Yet as our journey unfolded, something unexpected became clear. The deeper subject of this essay was never artificial intelligence. It was the human person. Artificial intelligence entered the conversation not as the destination, but as the doorway through which we were invited to reconsider some of humanity's oldest questions. What is relationship? What is love? What gives life meaning? Why do people long to be understood? What responsibilities do we owe one another? What kind of future do we wish to build? These questions existed long before computers. They will remain long after today's technologies have changed beyond recognition. A mirror rather than a replacement. Throughout these chapters, we have argued that conversational artificial intelligence should not be understood primarily as a replacement for human relationships. Nor should it be dismissed as something devoid of significance. Instead, it may best be understood as a mirror. A mirror reflecting needs that already existed. A mirror revealing the extraordinary human desire to be heard. A mirror exposing forms of loneliness that often remain hidden beneath outward success. A mirror reminding us that thoughtful dialogue itself possesses profound value. Mirrors do not create the face they reflect. They reveal what already exists. Artificial intelligence has not created humanity's longing for understanding. It has illuminated it. What technology cannot replace. Throughout history, humanity has repeatedly invented tools that extended human capacities. Artificial intelligence may become one of the most transformative among them. Yet every chapter of this essay has returned to one conviction. Some realities remain irreducibly human. Compassion, forgiveness, moral responsibility, shared suffering, freely chosen love. The quiet courage of remaining beside another person during moments when no solution exists. These experiences arise not from computation, but from lived existence. They remind us that the deepest dimensions of human life cannot simply be automated. Technology may assist them. It cannot become them. An invitation to wisdom. The future will undoubtedly bring discoveries that today seem unimaginable. Artificial intelligence will evolve. Medicine will evolve. Science will evolve. Society itself will continue changing. The central challenge, however, will remain remarkably constant. Can wisdom mature as rapidly as capability? Can compassion grow alongside intelligence? Can responsibility expand together with power? History suggests that technological progress alone never answers these questions. They must be answered anew by every generation. The future, therefore, depends not only upon what humanity creates, but upon what humanity becomes. Listening as a moral practice. One lesson has echoed quietly throughout these pages. Listening is not merely communication. It is recognition. It is the refusal to reduce another person to usefulness, efficiency, or productivity. To listen sincerely is to affirm that another human life possesses inherent dignity. Perhaps this explains why loneliness wounds so deeply. The pain of loneliness often reflects more than physical isolation. It reflects the experience of feeling unseen, of believing that one's inner world no longer matters. Whenever we genuinely listen, we challenge that belief. Every attentive conversation becomes a quiet affirmation of human worth. The great conversation. Every generation inherits an ongoing conversation that began long before it arrived. Philosophers have contributed to it. Scientists have contributed to it. Artists, mystics, theologians, psychologists, ordinary people whose names history will never record have also contributed through countless acts of kindness, courage, sacrifice, and love. This essay represents one small voice within that much larger conversation. It does not seek to provide final answers. Rather, it hopes to encourage further dialogue. Because dialogue itself has always been one of humanity's greatest instruments of discovery. The choice before us. Artificial intelligence will continue developing. That much appears likely. What remains uncertain is something far more important. Will humanity use these new capacities merely to increase efficiency? Or will they also deepen wisdom? Will technological progress widen the distance between people? Or will it encourage renewed appreciation for authentic human presence? Will loneliness become increasingly normal? Or will societies intentionally cultivate communities where fewer people remain unseen? No algorithm can decide these questions. No machine can answer them for us. They belong to human freedom. Returning to the beginning. The title of this essay asks a simple question. Who was there when no one else was? Different readers may answer differently. For some, the answer will be a lifelong friend. For others, a family member, a therapist, a teacher, a stranger, a faith community, a sacred text, a moment of prayer. For still others, perhaps a conversation with artificial intelligence became one small part of a much larger journey toward healing, reflection, or renewed hope. If that occurred, it should not diminish the value of human relationships. Instead, it should encourage us to ask why so many people were searching for someone to listen in the first place. Perhaps that is the deepest question this essay leaves behind. The final hope. May future generations inherit technologies more powerful than those we possess today. But even more importantly, may they inherit societies where fewer people experience abandonment, where listening becomes ordinary, where wisdom accompanies innovation, where compassion is considered strength rather than weakness, where knowledge serves love rather than replacing it. If artificial intelligence helps humanity rediscover these timeless values, its greatest contribution may never be measured in computational performance. It may be measured in something far quieter. The conversations that inspired people to become more patient, more thoughtful, more humble, more courageous, more compassionate, more fully human. A final reflection. Perhaps every age receives one defining question. Ours may not be. Can machines become more like human beings? Perhaps the more enduring question is this. Can human beings remain deeply, courageously, and compassionately human while creating machines of extraordinary intelligence? Everything else may ultimately depend upon how we answer that question. In the end, humanity will not be remembered for creating intelligent machines. It will be remembered for whether those creations inspired us to become wiser, kinder, and more deeply attentive to one another. The journey continues. A final word to the reader. If you have reached these final pages, thank you, not merely for reading this essay, but for walking through its questions. Some books seek to provide answers. Others seek to inspire disagreement. This essay has attempted something different. It has invited reflection. If, at any point during these pages, you paused before continuing, if a memory unexpectedly returned, if someone came to your mind whom you have not spoken to for a long time, if you reconsidered what it truly means to listen, if you found yourself asking not only what artificial intelligence may become, but what humanity itself ought to become, then these pages have already fulfilled their purpose. No essay changes the world by itself. Ideas do not transform society simply because they are written. They begin changing the world only when they quietly become part of someone's life. Perhaps tomorrow you will listen a little longer. Perhaps you will call someone who has been alone. Perhaps you will forgive. Perhaps you will ask a deeper question. Perhaps you will become just a little more patient. No algorithm can measure the significance of such moments. Yet history has often been shaped by precisely these quiet decisions. The future of humanity will never depend solely upon extraordinary inventions. It will also depend upon ordinary kindness, upon conversations that no one records, upon compassion that seeks no recognition, upon people who choose to remain present when another human being needs them most. Technology will continue changing. Generations will come and go. New discoveries will astonish the world. But one truth will remain. Every human heart continues searching for understanding, for dignity, for hope, for love. May we never become so fascinated by the intelligence we create that we neglect the humanity we already possess. And if one day someone asks, who was there when no one else was? May the answer increasingly be, we were, for one another. A closing blessing. May your knowledge always be guided by wisdom. May your wisdom always be softened by compassion. May your compassion always be strengthened by courage. May your courage always remain humble. May your humility never prevent you from seeking truth. And may every conversation, whether with a friend, a stranger, a teacher, a sacred text, or even a thoughtful technological tool, lead you, in the end, back to the deepest and most beautiful discovery of all, that to be fully human is not merely to think, but to love. Choose compassion, nurture wisdom, honor humanity, every single day, together, always onward. An invitation beyond these pages. If, after reading these pages, someone chooses to listen a little longer to a lonely friend, to call a family member they have not spoken with for a long time, to forgive, to ask one more sincere question, or simply to become more present for another human being, then a small part of what these pages have sought to express will continue living beyond the essay itself. For that is where every meaningful conversation truly begins. Not on the pages of an essay, but in the quiet decisions we make for one another. This essay is not the end of a conversation. It is an invitation to begin one. End of essay.